Pay attention to this security camera footage outside a nightclub in Swindon, England. It recorded something on the night of March 18, 2011. The timestamp on the footage reads 2:46 in the morning. The camera is positioned inside Suju nightclub on High Street in Swindon's Old Town. It points toward the staircase near the exit. A young woman comes down the stairs. She is wearing a gray dress, a black bolero-style jacket, dark tights, and flat boots. She carries a dark handbag with a beige flower on the front. She moves without hesitation. She is not stumbling. She is not distressed. She looks like someone who has had a good night and is ready to go home. She pushes through the main entrance and steps out onto High Street. A guy also walked past her. A separate camera further along High Street picks up what happens next. A green taxi moves along the road in the same direction Sian is walking. Then it slows, it turns, it circles back. The taxi pulls up alongside her. It stops. For more than 60 seconds, it stays there. Then it drives away. That is the last image the nightclub camera captures of her. Her name is Sian O'Callaghan. She is 22 years old. Her flat is 800 meters away, roughly a 10-minute walk through streets she knows well. She has made this journey dozens of times before. She never arrives. And Sian O'Callaghan is gone. She had not walked there. She could not have walked there in 32 minutes. Someone had taken her. If you want to know what really happened on that road after the camera stopped recording, stay with me, because this story is far darker and far more complicated than it first appears.
Sian O'Callaghan, who's 22, hasn't been seen since leaving a nightclub in Swindon.
At a news conference in the town, her boyfriend Kevin Reap said someone out there must know where she is.
Sian Emma O'Callaghan was born on June 3, 1988, in Swindon, Wiltshire, a town of roughly 200,000 people sitting halfway between Bristol and Reading in southwest England. By the time she was 22, she had built a quiet, steady life there. She worked as an office administrator. She had a close circle of friends. She called her parents regularly. People who knew her used the same words over and over: bubbly, warm, the kind of person you liked immediately without quite knowing why. She stood 5 feet 3 inches tall, with straight brown hair and green eyes. She was not famous. She was not extraordinary in the way the world usually defines that word. She was just a young woman with a job she enjoyed, people who loved her, and a future she was still figuring out. Sian shared a flat on Westmoreland Road in Swindon's Old Town with her boyfriend Kevin Reap. The relationship was solid. They talked about the future. They made plans. The flat was 800 meters from Suju nightclub on High Street, close enough that walking home after a night out was never a second thought. That Saturday, March 18, 2011, was not a special occasion. There was no birthday, no celebration, no particular reason for the night out beyond the simple pleasure of being young and having friends to spend time with. Sian met her group at Suju, a Japanese-themed nightclub in the Old Town area, and the evening unfolded the way those evenings do. Music, dancing, conversation. Kevin had been at the races that day. He came home, went to bed around 10:30 that night, and left his phone nearby. He expected Sian back later. There was nothing unusual about that. She knew the route. She had walked it more times than either of them could count. Detective Superintendent Steve Fulcher later reviewed the nightclub's CCTV footage frame by frame. He noted that Sian had become separated from her friends around 2:15 in the morning, not through any argument or drama, but simply because they had drifted to different parts of the dance floor. And the footage showed her talking to other people in the club during that final half hour. According to Fulcher, she appeared happy. At 2:52 a.m., she walked out of the main entrance onto High Street, 800 meters from her front door, a walk that should have taken 10 minutes. She never made it home. While Sian was inside Suju that Saturday night, a man was already driving. His name was Christopher Halliwell. He was 47 years old. He was a licensed taxi driver based in Swindon. To anyone who encountered him, he looked completely ordinary, a father of 3, living with his partner Heather in a modest home, doing a job that thousands of people across Britain do every single day. Nothing about him would have raised alarm. That was the point. Halliwell had been born in Swindon, but raised in Scotland. He had worked various jobs over the years: window cleaner, builder, and eventually taxi driver. In the 1980s, he had served prison time for burglary. By 2011, that conviction was decades old. He had moved on, at least on paper. He drove a green Toyota Avensis with taxi markings on the side. On the night of March 18, 2011, Halliwell clocked out of his taxi company at 1 o'clock in the morning. His shift was over. He had no more fares to collect, no more routes to run. But he did not go home. For the next 90 minutes, Halliwell drove through the streets of Swindon, no destination, no passenger, no clear purpose that investigators could identify, except one. He was looking for someone. Prosecutors would later argue that Halliwell was a regular visitor to Swindon's Vice District and that he viewed certain women as targets. He had a pattern, they argued, of seeking out people he considered vulnerable, women who were alone, women who were unlikely to be missed quickly, women whose disappearance might not immediately trigger a large-scale search. That night, investigators believe, he was not looking for Sian O'Callaghan specifically. He did not know her. According to those who studied the case, he most likely mistook her for a sex worker, a young woman walking alone in the early hours of the morning, heading away from a nightclub. She was, in the coldest possible terms, a victim of opportunity. She was simply in the wrong place at the moment he was circling. 90 minutes is not a short amount of time to drive around a town with no stated reason. It is long enough to suggest this was not impulsive. It is long enough to suggest that whoever was behind the wheel that night had done something like this before, or had at least thought about it carefully enough to know how to wait. Investigators would later reflect on that 90-minute window as one of the most telling details in the entire case. Predators, they noted, do not usually develop patience overnight. At 2:52 a.m., Sian stepped out of Suju onto High Street. Halliwell's green Toyota Avensis was already nearby. Kevin Reap woke the next morning to an empty flat. He checked his phone. No reply to the text he had sent at 3:24 in the morning. No missed calls back. No message explaining where she was. He tried calling. Nothing. He tried again. Still nothing. For Sian, this was not normal behavior. She had never gone silent like this before. She had no reason to disappear. There had been no argument, no trouble, nothing in her personal life that suggested she had chosen to walk away. At 9:45 a.m. on March 19, 2011, Kevin contacted police and reported Sian missing. The response was immediate. More than 60 officers were assigned to the case within the first 24 hours. And Detective Superintendent Steve Fulcher of Wiltshire Police took charge of the investigation. A public appeal went out on March 20th. Police confirmed they had begun searching Savernake Forest, a vast woodland 12 miles south of Swindon, and they explained why.
What I can tell you is that a 47-year-old man from Swindon is in custody, having been arrested for kidnap and 2 murders. The location of 2 bodies have been identified to me by this individual.
That text Kevin sent at 3:24 in the morning had been delivered. Sian's phone had received it. But when investigators traced the signal, it did not come from anywhere near Westmoreland Road. And it came from a mobile mast near Savernake Forest, 12 miles or 19 kilometers from the nightclub. Her phone had traveled that distance in just 32 minutes after she was last seen on CCTV. Police stated clearly that the journey could only have been made in a vehicle. Sian had not walked there. She had been taken there. Her phone continued to ping that same area for roughly 12 hours before the battery finally died. On March 22nd, and the search expanded in a way that few investigations ever see. More than 400 members of the public arrived at Savernake Forest to help. They came with walking sticks and determination, splitting into groups and working through dense undergrowth and thick woodland. An anonymous donor offered a £20,000 reward for any information that could lead police to Sian. Savernake Forest covers 4,500 acres. And one searcher captured the scale of the task in a single sentence. What they had covered so far, he said, was about the size of a postage stamp. By March 23rd, investigators had used Sian's phone data to identify a number of specific areas, what Fulcher called hot spots. The public was asked to stand down. The search was becoming more targeted. Then, on March 24th, police issued an urgent public appeal. They were looking for witnesses who had seen a green Toyota Avensis with taxi markings, spotted between Swindon and Savernake Forest between 3 and 4 in the morning, and again between noon and 9 in the evening, on the day Sian vanished. The net was closing. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. This story is about to take a turn nobody saw coming. While the public search was underway in Savernake Forest, investigators were working a separate angle entirely. They went back to the CCTV footage from High Street and studied it carefully. Frame by frame, they enhanced the images and built a clearer picture of what had happened in those final minutes before Sian vanished. What they saw confirmed their suspicions. A green taxi had passed Sian on High Street, slowed, circled back, and pulled up directly alongside her. The car stopped, then it drove away, and Sian was gone. But there was more. A police dash camera had captured the same green taxi, driving past just minutes after Sian disappeared. The footage was clear enough to read the license plate. Investigators ran the plate. It came back registered to a 47-year-old taxi driver from Swindon, Christopher Halliwell. Detective Superintendent Steve Fulcher made a calculated decision at this point. Rather than arresting Halliwell immediately, he ordered round-the-clock surveillance. And the reasoning was straightforward. If they moved too quickly, they risked alerting Halliwell before they had the full picture. If he believed he was not yet a suspect, he might lead them somewhere. He might move evidence. He might, without realizing it, hand them exactly what they needed. Surveillance teams followed Halliwell everywhere. They watched him pick up fares. They watched him go about his daily routine as though nothing had happened. He had no idea he was being watched. Then he did something that changed the timeline entirely. Halliwell walked into a pharmacy and purchased enough paracetamol to kill himself. The surveillance team recognized it immediately for what it was, a suicide risk. If Halliwell died before they could question him, they might never find Sian. They might never find anyone else he had harmed. Whatever he knew would die with him. Fulcher gave the order, arrest him now. On the afternoon of March 24th, 2011, officers moved in on Christopher Halliwell at an Asda supermarket car park in North Swindon. He was wrestled to the ground and placed under arrest on suspicion of kidnap. His green Toyota Avensis, with its taxi marking still visible on the side, was seized at the scene. He was in custody, but getting him to talk was going to be another matter entirely. When police arrest a suspect in Britain, the procedure is clear. You take them to the station. You caution them. You give them access to a solicitor. You follow every step in order without deviation. Detective Superintendent Steve Fulcher did not do that. Instead of driving Halliwell to the police station, Fulcher had him taken to Barbary Castle, an open hilltop location on the outskirts of Swindon. No formal interview room, no recording equipment running through proper channels, no solicitor present. Fulcher's reasoning was urgent and personal. He believed Sian might still be alive. And every minute spent on paperwork and procedure was a minute she might be running out of. He could not live with that possibility if he did not act. At first, Halliwell said nothing useful. He asked for his solicitor. Fulcher pushed. He appealed to whatever remained of Halliwell's conscience. He told him that a young woman's life might depend on what he said next. And then Christopher Halliwell broke. He led police to a location near Uffington in Oxfordshire, roughly 20 miles north of Swindon. Officers placed markers at the site. On March 24, 2011, Sian O'Callaghan's body was found in a shallow grave. The cause of death, according to court records, was a combination of 2 stab wounds to the neck and head and compression to the neck. Detective Superintendent Fulcher confirmed at a press conference that Sian had not been sexually assaulted. Kevin Reap was informed. Footage captured outside showed him overcome, a man destroyed by news he had been dreading for 5 days. His grief needed no explanation. But Halliwell was not finished. Standing in those fields, he looked at Fulcher and said words that nobody present was prepared for. "Do you want another one?" He told Fulcher he had killed a second woman. Her name was Becky Godden. She was 20 years old when she disappeared from Swindon. That was in 2003, 8 years earlier. Her family had spent nearly a decade not knowing what had happened to her. Halliwell led police to Eastleach in Gloucestershire, where Becky's remains were found buried in the ground. 2 families, 2 daughters, both found on the same day because a detective broke the rules. Back at the police station, Halliwell sat through interview after interview and said just 2 words, no comment. He refused to repeat a single thing he had said at Barbary Castle or in those fields. And because Fulcher had bypassed proper procedure, no caution, no solicitor, no formal safeguards, a judge ruled that everything Halliwell had confessed was inadmissible in court. Mrs. Justice Cox found that Fulcher had committed serious breaches of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act of 1984. The confessions, the directions to both bodies, none of it could be used as evidence. The prosecution's case against Halliwell for Sian's murder was saved by 2 things alone. On Sian's blood, found inside Halliwell's taxi, and Halliwell's own DNA recovered from her body. That physical evidence was enough to charge him. Becky Godden's case was not so fortunate. Without the confession and with limited physical evidence, prosecutors initially dropped the charges against Halliwell for her murder entirely. Her family was left waiting again. In September 2013, the Independent Police Complaints Commission published its findings. It described Fulcher's conduct as a catastrophic breach of the guidelines designed to protect a suspect's rights. In January 2014, a disciplinary tribunal found him guilty of gross misconduct. He received a final written warning. In May 2014, Fulcher resigned from Wiltshire Police. He has never said he would do anything differently. Becky Godden's mother, Karen Edwards, put it plainly. Had Fulcher followed the guidelines, she said, as Becky would never have been found. She would never have come into the equation at all. On May 31st, 2012, Christopher Halliwell appeared in court and entered a plea of not guilty to the murder of Sian O'Callaghan. He held that position for months. Then, on October 19, 2012, he walked into Bristol Crown Court and changed his plea. Guilty. Mrs. Justice Cox sentenced him to life in prison with a minimum term of 25 years. He would not be eligible to apply for parole until he had served at least a quarter of a century behind bars. The Court of Appeal reviewed the sentence and upheld it on December 14, 2012. For Sian's family, it was the only verdict that made sense. For Becky Godden's family, it meant almost nothing. Halliwell had not been charged with Becky's murder. She was still, in the eyes of the law, an unresolved case. In 2015, Halliwell was rearrested and charged with Becky Godden's murder. Before the trial began, he made an offer through his legal team. He would confess, fully and formally, in exchange for immunity from prosecution for any other offenses he may have committed. Police refused. The trial proceeded. On September 19, 2016, after just 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned a unanimous verdict: guilty. 4 days later, on September 23, 2016, Justice John Griffith Williams handed down a whole life order. Christopher Halliwell would never be released. He would die in prison. The case did not end with the sentencing. In 2019, ITV broadcast a drama called A Confession, with actor Martin Freeman playing Detective Superintendent Steve Fulcher. It brought the story to a new audience and reignited public debate about where the line sits between following procedure and saving lives. In 2022, the Independent Office for Police Conduct published a report concluding that Wiltshire Police had missed significant opportunities to identify Halliwell as a dangerous individual between 2011 and 2014. The question of what else he may have done and who else may have been harmed has never been fully answered. The sentencing closed the courtroom chapter of this case, but it did not close the questions. When police searched Christopher Halliwell's property, they found items of women's clothing. Some of those items were matched to Sian O'Callaghan and Becky Godden. Others were not matched to anyone. They belong to women whose identities have never been confirmed. Women whose families may still be waiting for answers they do not know they are waiting for. During his time in prison, Halliwell made a phone call that investigators have never been able to fully explain. In that call, he reportedly referenced 8 murders. When this detail became public, police stated they had never used that number themselves and could not confirm it. They did not deny it either. The number sat there, unverified and unexplained. It was not the only strange detail to emerge from his time behind bars. In 1985, years before either murder, Halliwell reportedly asked a fellow inmate a question that has since taken on a very different weight. He asked how many kills it takes before someone is considered a serial killer. There were other inconsistencies that troubled investigators. When Halliwell led police to Becky Godden's grave, he told them she was buried 5 feet underground. Her remains were found just inches below the surface. Detectives noted this discrepancy carefully. One explanation, and it is unconfirmed, is that Halliwell was confusing her grave with another one, a grave in a different location, belonging to someone else. In custody, Halliwell also drew a series of maps. The contents of those maps have never been released to the public. Detective Superintendent Fulcher, who spent years studying Halliwell's behavior and movements, has said publicly that 8 victims is probably an underestimate. a retired detective who investigated the case, independently published a book suggesting possible links to as many as 27 murders across Britain. Several cases have been formally investigated for potential connections to Halliwell. None have resulted in charges. Sally Ann John disappeared from Swindon in 1995. She was a sex worker, and Halliwell was known to have been a client. Postcards were sent in her name after she vanished, later found to have been forged. Her body has never been found. Julie Finley disappeared in Merseyside in 1994. Her case was formally reviewed in 2020, and no charges followed. A Channel 4 documentary broadcast in 2023 examined a possible link to Trevelyan Evans, who disappeared from Llangollen in Wales. No connection was proven. North Yorkshire Police investigated whether Halliwell had any involvement in the disappearance of Claudia Lawrence in 2009. They concluded it was unlikely he had been present in the area. Wiltshire Police separately produced CCTV footage showing Halliwell buying petrol in Swindon on the evening in question. The case of Linda Rozelle, who disappeared in 2002, was examined by the organization Inside Justice in 2018. Her husband was convicted of her murder. The review found nothing linking Halliwell to her disappearance. Each of these cases remains officially unresolved in relation to Halliwell. But there is one detail that sits above all the others. In 2015, before his trial for Becky Godden's murder, Halliwell offered to confess, fully and formally, in exchange for immunity from prosecution for other offenses. Not one other offense. Other offenses. Plural. Police refused the deal. The trial went ahead, and Halliwell went back to silence. He has not spoken publicly since. Sian O'Callaghan would be in her mid-30s today. She would likely still be in Swindon, or somewhere nearby. Still calling her parents, still making plans, still being the kind of person that people describe the same way, every time, without even comparing notes. Warm, bubbly, instantly likable. Instead, she is remembered through a few seconds of CCTV footage, a gray dress, and a dark handbag with a beige flower on the front. 800 meters. That was all that stood between her and home. A walk she had made dozens of times before, through streets she knew, and in a town she had grown up in. It did not feel dangerous. There was no reason it should have. That is the part that stays with you. There are things we can take from this case, not as rules and not as blame, but as practical habits that cost nothing and could matter enormously. Pre-book your transport before a night out. Use a tracked service where someone else can see the route. Before you leave, share your live location with a friend or family member. Not just a text saying you're on your way, but a pin they can follow in real time. If a vehicle stops alongside you unexpectedly and you did not call for it, keep walking. Move toward light, toward people, toward noise. Make yourself visible and make yourself heard. If someone does not come home and something feels wrong, report it immediately. Do not wait. The phone ping that placed Sian 12 miles from home in 32 minutes was only useful because Kevin acted quickly. That data has a window. Time matters. And remember what happened on March 22, 2011, when more than 400 strangers showed up to search a 4,500-acre forest for a young woman most of them had never met. Community action is not symbolic. It is real, and it works. Christopher Halliwell is in his 60s now. He sits in a prison cell under a whole life order. He will not be released. He will not grow old in a home of his choosing, surrounded by people who love him. That chapter is closed. But the investigation is not. Wiltshire Police have stated publicly that they continue to keep an open mind regarding other potential victims. The maps Halliwell drew in custody have never been released. The unidentified clothing found at his property has never been matched. The questions raised by his 2015 offer, immunity for other offenses, plural, have never been answered. A security camera outside a nightclub captured Sian O'Callaghan walking out of a door and into the night. It did not capture what came next. That gap between what the camera saw and what it didn't is where the truth still lives. For the families still waiting. For the detectives still looking. For every name that has not yet been spoken in a courtroom. The camera caught her leaving. It just couldn't follow her home. If this story moved you, please share it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, it would mean a lot. It helps us keep telling stories like this one.